Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started today. Welcome to today's Kanverse 101 demo. My name is Tanner Nyers. I'm a pre-sales consultant at Kanverse where I work hand in hand with our product and engineering teams to develop unique environments tailored to our prospects' needs. Now, I've been in the AP space for about 5 years now and the automation space for 3. I started at Cummins Engines, oversaw the full accounting lifecycle for their service and operations department, which ultimately led into my first AP automation experience at another company where I onboarded and implemented over 150 plus customer accounts. Now we're going to dive right in for today, but a little bit more about Kanverse as a company and why customers choose to partner with us. The reason is really twofold. One being our technology framework. It's what drives immediate value and infinite extendability for enterprises worldwide. Our multi-stage patented AI engine executes 99.5% extraction accuracy and enables us to bring structure to various unstructured documents and scenarios. Without this, all the downstream business processes really don't matter. This, combined with our flexible business rule framework, enables us to truly create end-to-end touchless processes, regardless of your company or industry-specific requirements. And next is our business model. Now, we're both a startup and a long-standing company. The benefits of a startup are we're using the latest and greatest cutting-edge technology. If OCR was a real player in solving the problem for enterprises, we wouldn't be in business. We provide an agile approach for fast ROI with white glove service where every client counts. Now, we're also long-standing. We come from a 100 million plus company with 22 years of experience in integrations, ERP, digital, and finance transformation. We're not just a slick technology, but a team that creates end-to-end solutions for our clients and financial stability. Not to mention, we don't put our clients in a box. Each customer is unique in their own way. We support a diverse range of industries, partnering with some of the largest event management firms, pharmaceutical and automotive manufacturers, as well as leaders in cybersecurity and electrical contracting, among others. The hyper automation capabilities is truly what creates end-to-end customizable workflows leading to touchless processing. All of our clients, they all do document processing, but nobody does it the same. Our IDP technology has transformed enterprises of all sizes and sectors with a 0% attrition rate. Now, there's a lot going on in this slide here, but to oversimplify it, Kanverse is a digital AP clerk. Being an IDP solution, we're not just limited to invoice automation. Kanverse has seen over 50 plus use cases since our inception and can be extended to any document processing use cases because of our proprietary and patented multi-stage AI engine. Now, to name a few of these additional use cases, aside from AP, we service sales order automation, insurance intake, and we actually have a unique process for milk tickets, where a customer of ours receives large vats of milk and documentation, the volume, grade, quality, among other things, which we extract and update their ERP appropriately. Now, to talk about our diagram a little bit more, most clients that we work with receive documents to their centralized inbox, AP at company, right? Undoubtedly, these inboxes not only receive invoices, but spam, statements, vendor inquiries, and much more. What Kanverse is able to do is integrate directly with your email inbox. It can even be a SharePoint site or FTP site, in which we ping about every 30 to 60 seconds of those incoming documents. Now, we don't limit documents in any style or format. Most OCR companies only work with PDF. However, we pride ourselves in Excel, PNG, JPG, Word, and many other document types. It's not limited, and your vendors don't have to change up how they're sending you your invoices. The next part about that is classification. Now we're able to see those documents coming in, and then classify them as invoice or other. So in our demonstration today, we'll show how we're able to segregate those documents within the platform automatically, as we know this is a huge manual touch point for any other solutions. In addition to that, to extend on our graph here, what we're going to do after classifying is then extracting all the details from those documents. So our IDP isn't just extracting header information like your typical OCR company. What we're able to do is extract all header, line information, capture any freight, taxes, or discounts that are also found on the invoice, which is huge in processing and localization rules for global enterprises all around the world. Now, on top of that, what's going to happen next is our validation. So our business rule framework, which we'll talk about more in our demonstration today, and really powers touchless processing for all enterprises is going to come into effect. So any routing, collaboration, coding, matching, that's what our business rule framework is going to do. Next, we're going to publish our invoice into the ERP. Now, what we pride ourselves on the most is auto publish. And what we mean by this is a completely touchless process from the time the invoice is ingested via email is automatically published into your ERP without any human review. This is just some of the main factors in the key diagram, what we're going to be touching on today. Now, next, before we dive in, Kanverse's IDP technology combined with our robust business rule framework is truly the brains behind how an enterprise is receiving near touchless processing. Now, combined together, these two drive immediate value with cross-industry, out-of-the-box use cases while being infinitely extendable to any other document processing and agentic use case. In a future session, we'll demo our brand new vendor agent that can assist AP and procurement teams in vendor onboarding and inquiries. Now, really, for the quickest ROI, our clients get started with any one of our cross-industry out-of-the-box use cases and quickly deploy the next out-of-the-box use case for even one specific to their company or industry. The last piece before we dive into our demo today is the secret sauce. So most companies OEM an OCR tool and say that they use AI, where Kanverse is AI driven with elements of OCR. OCR uses templates, we use AI models. For a template-driven approach, if you have hundreds and thousands of vendors that you need to teach the system where each data point or each vendor format for that vendor. For example, POs in the left, vendor names in the right, invoice amount in the bottom. This can get really, really timeless when having to update these templates, especially given that your vendor's invoice documents can change, right? This is going to present a huge problem for OCR systems, while our AI engine is able to process those, validate, and extract accordingly. Now, really, what that multi-stage AI engine is going to do is providing that 99.5% accuracy. Without ever seeing your documents, we'll get you that 90 to 95% accuracy during implementation, in which we train our AI model to be about 99.5% accurate, not using any templates. Ultimately, making faster time to value, more resilient, more reliable extraction, and the ability to tackle endless use cases. And that's our introduction for Kanverse. So what we have lined up today is for our demo scenarios. We'll be talking about a few of those IDP topics: ingestion and classification to start, non-PO invoice coding, PO matching, publishing into the ERP, and end on dashboards and reports. So what we're going to start with for our ingestion and classification piece, essentially before we get started here, I want to talk about Kanverse. We support 35 plus out-of-the-box AP scenarios, along with hundreds of custom scenarios tailored to our diverse customer base. For our demo today, we'll walk through each step of our IDP process, starting with that ingestion and classification piece. So with ingestion, we'll show how Kanverse is able to integrate directly with your mailbox and receive those incoming documents within the platform. Now, the next step we had talked about is classifying those incoming documents. We'll show how Kanverse is able to differentiate them as invoice or other and segregate them appropriately for you within the system. Now, in addition to all of this, Kanverse is able to automatically split any multi-page documents for you without having to manually add in a blank page or use third-party applications. Something that during my time in AP, I had to spend a lot of time doing was adding in blank pages using third-party tools. Ultimately, before even uploading the invoice, it took me about 5 minutes to get it completed. Now, we'll also touch on non-English. So Kanverse supports over 40 plus romantic languages as well as Mandarin and Hebrew. Since most of the enterprises we work with have a global presence, we take into account any localization rules of each country, which is super impactful during tax capturing. Now, what I'm going to do now is come over to my email. I have 5 documents that we're going to send in, really 6, and we're going to touch on each of these and review. So our first one is going to be a tilted or skewed invoice. Now, as we had mentioned, OCR is going to have a little bit of issues with this, but Kanverse's IDP technology is well-versed in skewed documents and even handwritten documents, which we'll get to in a later demonstration. But we'll see in our system how Kanverse is still able to extract all the bill to, ship to, invoice information, line information, even though this is a skewed document, and help unskew it for us. Next, we have our non-English invoice. In this case, we have a German invoice. Same thing's going to happen here as far as the extraction goes. What we'll also see on this one when it comes into Kanverse is there's tax being captured as well. Next, this is going to be our multi-page example where the system is going to auto-split these two invoices for us. We have two Salesforce invoices here that are both 2 pages long. As I mentioned before, lots of time AP does before even processing an invoice is having to split these, add in blank pages. Kanverse is going to do the legwork for you. Next is our statement or other. Like we said, we know those email inboxes contain invoices, but among that, statements, inquiries, and much more. We're going to show how Kanverse is able to segregate this as an other document in the platform for you. And next, a complex unstructured invoice. As you can see here, this invoice is not the prettiest looking that we've ever seen. When we say unstructured, if we come down to our line items, we don't have any borders separating our lines, and it also feeds into 2 pages. Now, this is really the true separator of IDP versus OCR, where OCR is only going to try and capture some of this header information and none of the line information. And not to mention, in most cases, OCR isn't even looking at the second page of documents. So all these additional line items would never be shown in an OCR system. We'll also show any additional freight, discount, and tax amount being captured on this too. Now, the one document I didn't show is going to be our auto-publish example, where from the time it's ingested via email, meets all its validations, and is good to be published into the ERP without any human review needed. Now, while we're waiting just a second for those documents to load, as I said, we're directly integrated with your email inbox. There's no forwarding rules required. We're pinging it about every 30 to 60 seconds. We can already see those documents coming in, but let's talk about the lay of the land. Currently, I'm on our Invoices tab. This is going to be home of our AP clerks that are going to work through any documents in process, resolve any errors, or collaborate when needed. What we'll touch on later today is our dashboards and reports. Our dashboards is going to be the home for any of our CFOs, directors of accounting, to get a high-level overview of those documents in process. We have our training studio. This is where we deploy those AI models to train your documents that may be unstructured and need a little help in. Next is our Others tab. This is going to be where that statement that we had sent in is going to come. Now, we had also alluded to our vendor agent. Our vendor onboarding tab is where we're going to be able to initiate any vendor onboarding forms and work through any approvals needed. Now, this is going to come in a later session, so stay tuned for for the future webinars that we're hosting to see a little bit more about our vendor onboarding. And next, configurations. Now, Kanverse is a role-based platform. Given that, I'm on an admin permission, so I have a full wide view of everything in the system. But given that, we know that permissions are huge. Seeing different entities, different invoices is also a big factor. Kanverse enables that through our permissions. Now, to talk a little bit more about our dashboard here, you can see all the statuses that an invoice can be in. What we mean by bringing those not stuffing customers into the box is these statuses may not resonate with yours. We can have as many or as little custom statuses as needed to fit your process. To expand on that, you can see here my document name. If I click into this blue hyperlink, I'll go right into the invoice. But without doing so, we can see a few fields that we've extracted from these documents without having to click in. Vendor name, invoice number, PO number, invoice amount. These can also be completely customized to your company's needs for which fields you want to have a view of. Now, in addition to this, what we have is, for example, some errors and warnings. So you can see warnings such as PO number not captured and any errors such as invalid vendor name, duplicate invoice number, invalid PO, etc. What we can do in these cases where we see a GL code is not found is manually assign invoices to users. So what I can do is click assign to collaborator. In this case, the GL account is unknown. I'm not sure what it should be coded to. I can choose a reason code and I can select Jack Jones as he's our senior accountant that knows the GL coding. So this is just one of the manual ways that we can assign invoices. What we're going to show a little bit later is how our business rules can automate assignment given some of these errors in cases of non-PO invoices that don't have a GL code, or discrepancies with POs like the unit price doesn't match our PO, or our receiving doesn't meet that of what we're being billed on the invoice. So I'll go ahead and refresh our page really quick. Before moving on, we can also download this report too of all of our invoices here. We'll talk a little bit more about advanced reporting at the end of today's call. But let's talk about the documents we just sent in. Here you can see we have our 101 document. Before we go into that, let's talk about our auto split example. You can see a gray followed by 2 green. This is telling me that this single PDF document contained 2 invoices. You can see that Kanverse has split those for us. Here's our non-English and our tilted one. And of course, our other statement. So in this case, you can see how it's come to our others tab, sent in on today's date. For whatever reason, if we do need to process this statement for any means, we can move it back to our inbox just as so. But let's click into this documents and see truly how our IDP technology has extracted the information on these. Starting with our complex one. Now, as we had mentioned, this is a pretty unstructured document where we have some invoice information at the very top, but not to mention we have all these unstructured lines. You can see this doesn't present an issue for Kanverse by any means. We've gone ahead, appropriately extracted this information. Since this is our line items, we've gone ahead and coded them immediately for you. And since this is a PO-backed invoice, we'll talk about a little bit later about the PO details being made available to you in Kanverse without having to open up your ERP, view your invoice, and your PO side by side in 2 separate tabs. Next, of course, we have those Salesforce multi-invoices. So again, we've seen an auto split happening here where we only have one Salesforce document. If I click to the next page, here's our next one. A huge time saver for any AP team, especially coming from my experience. I know just how much time I spent adding in those blank pages. And we, of course, talked about those non-English invoices. As we work with global enterprises all around the world, we know that they're not just receiving documents in English format, but a multitude of languages. So here we can see our German document where we've extracted all of our information, header and line. And in addition to that, we've actually captured some tags. Next is going to be that tilted invoice. So as you can see, Kanverse has kind of helped unskew it for us. We can see the lines are a little opaque. We can't view the information too well, but this doesn't present an issue for our IDP technology, where we've still gone through, extracted all of it. So all of our header information is going to be found here on the right side. And of course, our line information found here at the 0, where we've also captured some tags on this one. Now we'll break down the invoice page a little bit more in our next scenario, but more or less just wanted to show how we're able to ping and with that email, be directly integrated with it, receive those incoming documents, and show you our extraction capabilities in real time. Moving on to our next section for non-PO invoices. Now, during essentially what's going to happen after that classification piece is we're going to extract that information as you had seen. Next, we're going to enable our business rule framework. So this framework is going to perform informed validations and apply both standard and custom rules to automate coding, approval workflows, error handling, assignment, and data validation before, of course, publishing the invoice into your ERP. Now let's look at this in action. So we'll come to my non-PO folder. What I also want to mention too before diving into this, imagine each of these folders are different entities. If you're a multi-entity organization, say the United States, each of your states are a different entity. What you would have here is all your entities lined up. Maybe they each have their own centralized inbox, and maybe they each have their own ERP. Kanverse can support multi-ERPs, multi-centralized inbox. There's a number of layers of customization that Kanverse can bring to facilitate all of your company scenarios. But to go forward with our non-PO, in our first example, we're going to talk about a predetermined GL. So in this case, what we have done using our business rule framework is said that anytime Salesforce sends me an invoice, we need it to be coded to a certain GL account. Now, this relates with some of you for some of those recurring invoices like rent, Utilities, AT&T invoice. I know that every time AT&T sends me an invoice, it always needs to be coded to internet charges. Rather than the document being uploaded and your clerk having to code it each time, what you can enable is a business rule to say that anytime Salesforce has sent me an invoice, it needs to be coded to this specific GL account. Now, I like to think of business rules as an if-then function, in this case for coding, but it can be for a multitude of areas. And what we'll see this for, especially too, is for our PO matching, where we need to resort to procurement for any type of errors that happen. And to talk about our invoice page a little bit more, what we have at the top always is our validations. So the first thing that's happening when our invoices is uploaded is we're validating that it's an active vendor in your system. Now, Kanverse has a real-time integration with your ERP. We're not relying on scheduled imports. What we're doing is we're extracting the information from the document, pinging the ERP to make sure, hey, is this a valid vendor name? And next, is it an invoice number that is unique? You can see here, this is just one of the many validations that Kanverse can bring as far as duplicates go. You can also see some warnings in yellow here, so PO number not captured. And we would have a red validation error here saying, hey, GL code mandatory, but this has already been coded for us. So this is just our first introduction to business rules and how we can enable that touchless processing. And what you're probably wondering is, well, when we're not going to have a business rule set up for each of our non-PO invoices, which is common. So how is the system able to alert me or recommend me of any GL coding that we've used previously? That's what we're going to see in our next example for suggested GL. If we come into here, essentially what's happened, you can see my warning at the top, GL code's been auto-populated for review. Now, in the cases where you don't have that business rule set up for your non-PO backed invoices is what the coding needs to be. The system is going to do based on machine learning and AI is we're going to take in the past coding habits for this active soft vendor and this description or item that we're being billed silver tier and say, what is the last invoices that we've seen that has been coded to this GL account with a similar description or item? In that case, the system can make a recommendation for you for which GL code has been used most commonly and let you know, hey, review is required here. Now, this is extremely important for any companies that are scaling, bringing on new AP team members, and facilitating and helping them code invoices. Now, of course, with our non-PO backed invoices, we need to talk about approval workflows. What's really great about Kanverse is we enable approval workflows at any level. You can have multiple levels of approval. It can be based on dollar amount, vendor, location, class, a GL code, for example. There's endless possibilities into approval workflows that we can enable for you. And we'll take a look at this here. If I come to my collaboration tab, invoice 127, it's already been coded for me. I see all my validations have been met here. What we can do is send this for approval, leave any comments. Now you'll notice it didn't let me choose any approvers. That's because we have an approval workflow set up for this particular vendor. What's going to happen is as soon as we click publish for send for approval, this is automatically going to be sent to our approvers via email or an app. Now, one of the best things about Kanverse is your approvers don't need to be in-app. As you can see here, I can approve the invoice or reject it directly from my email. There's no need to log in, accept it within Kanverse itself. You can see all of my invoice details, our line items, and the coding, as well as your invoice attachment too. Now, we know in most cases, enterprises already have an invoice approval set up in their ERP. So what we can do is publish invoices to your ERP as a draft or pending approval and release your approval workflow within your ERP without having to utilize Kanverse approval workflows. Now, moving on to our next topic of PO-backed invoices. Now, Kanverse's PO matching is really what separates us from the rest. We're not only able to extract lines from the invoice, but match them directly to the PO from your ERP. Our number one goal for these PO-backed invoices is achieving 100% first-time match rate. Essentially, in order to achieve this, we combine hierarchy, supplier reference, custom rules, past user guided matching, advanced matching, and fuzzy logic to increase that first-time match rate. Now, I know I threw a lot of words out there that some of us not be familiar with, but we're going to see some of these products in action here. In our first example, let's take another look at that 101 document that we had sent in earlier that was unstructured. Now, as you can see here, we've captured a PO on this invoice. Because of that, we've already talked about all of our extractions that we've made here and that net amount as well as freight and discount amount. You can see it's been coded for us appropriately here too. But for our PO-backed invoices, given that we have that real-time integration with your ERP, what we do is we bring all those PO details directly into the platform. So no longer do you have to open your ERP in a separate tab, look at the PO, compare it with your invoice, find any discrepancies, or ensure it validates all the way through. Here you can see all your PO details, your standard header information, who's the vendor, what's the buyer name, the PO header ID, our PO total, and then all of our line information. What's the item number, our description. We even have our supplier items here too, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and how we can use this to perfectly match an invoice and achieve that 100% first-time match rate. Of course, we do support any two-way and three-way matching. So in this case, you can see what our order quantity is, our balance, our received, canceled, and any billed quantity is. Now, we even take it a step further and shown you which lines of the invoice have been matched to which lines of your PO. Now, rather than, again, comparing those two side by side, making sure everything validates, we're going to show some validation errors that Kanverse brings to your AP team without having to manually review each of these invoice documents against the PO. But let's talk about our matching. Now, we had mentioned fuzzy logic supplier reference earlier. What you can see here is our description from on our invoice has this long code for the invoice description. But if you look at our PO line, it stops at AM. This is where fuzzy logic is coming into play, where say your vendor gives a different invoice description than what you have. Based on a certain confidence score, what we can do is say that this existing line here all the way up to AM matches with this one, and we can go ahead and make a match, given that the unit price, of course, matches too. Now, in addition to that, we can see that our vendor has a different vendor code or item code than we do. We can see our item code here and the vendor's item code. Given that fuzzy match wasn't able to make a match, what we can do is then dive into your item repository of vendors' item codes and make a match that way too. So very unique here in our matching capabilities. You can see it gets a little wild here with the different lines in PO. At any case, you do see an incorrect match, very easily to override the system and correct it. But this is our first introduction to PO matching. Again, all enabled through our real-time integration with your ERP and those 7 different matching tools that we have. Now, let's talk about a sad example for PO back invoices and discrepancies, warnings, and errors. Very common with any PO process. Our invoices don't necessarily always relate to our PO. In this case, what we can see here is Kanverse is alerting us of, yes, it's a valid vendor invoice number and my PO number is open, but we can see our first discrepancy error. Unit price is not matching with the PO unit price. If we come down into our document, we can see we have that validation error at the top, directly on my document, and within my lines coding too. Now, what can happen here, of course, is there's a need for collaboration to happen between AP and maybe procurement or even the vendor. What we enable for any AP team is a collaboration tab where you can add as many members or users as you need to start a chain of any type of inquiries. Hey, can you take a look at the PO or maybe our contract and ensure this is the appropriate pricing? Or hey, can you reach out to the vendor, right? We can also assign the invoice directly on this page too. But more or less, we know that the collaboration is going to be needed throughout any process. So because of this, what we've enabled through our business rules is automating assignment for some of these discrepancies. So we know that when these common discrepancies can happen, there's usually an individual within the procurement or AP team that's handling these for us. So what we have enabled here is a business rule to say that when this error invoice quantity is not fulfilling with the PO received quantity, it needs to be assigned to Murdoch Nelson. Rather than collaborating on hand manually or manually assigning it to them, this is more of what our business rule framework can enable. And now it might not just be for the specific error, right? It might be because of this error and a specific vendor, it needs to be assigned to Murdoch, right? There's limitless possibilities in the assigning and collaborating that we can bring to our business rule framework. I like to think of it again as an if then function. If this happens, then this is what we do. That's what our business rule framework really brings to AP teams. And we'll talk a little bit more about our PO matching too. We know in many cases, a vendor's invoice description may heavily vary or different from our PO description. In this case, you can see we're being billed for a silver tier item. However, if we take a look at our PO, we can see that this silver tier is being matched to Microsoft 365, where these are two completely different descriptions, but we know this is common between vendors in our AP department, where they have a completely different description than the item than we do. However, because of this, we've established a rule on the back end to say that when this vendor bills us for silver tier, match it to our Microsoft 365 license. And if that business rule wasn't established too, given that Kanverse wasn't able to make that first match, a team member comes in, makes the match for us. What we can do is start recommending that match to them, much like we saw for our GL coding capabilities. As you can see here, invoice description matched with PO line 1 from historical data, please review. This is more of that touchless processing that Kanverse is bringing to you, rather than each human having to review our invoice, make a match, see any discrepancies that are happening with our PO. And our next topic for publishing. Now, publishing into the ERP is huge. We're not only abiding by the business rules in Kanverse based on that information that we've extracted, but also your ERP's rules too. So when publishing happens, it can happen two ways. In our first scenario, we'll talk about a manual publish, where we can come into a document and we can see either a send for approval or a publish button. Now, of course, for those non-PO invoices, after it's meet all of its approvals, we can then publish it into our ERP. And this is going to be our manual way of publishing, just by simply clicking publish. But what most of our enterprises value the most about Kanverse and what really separates us from the rest is our auto publishing. Now, we had talked about that document we had sent in earlier for auto publishing, where given that it's ingested via email, all of its validations are met, it's a valid vendor, unique invoice number, there's no discrepancy, errors, or warnings, any validations. It requires zero human review. From the time it's received, it's already published into your ERP. Now, this is, again, what is freeing up so much time for our customers. We just had a webinar a few weeks ago with a valued electrical contractor in which they're receiving about 70% auto publishing rate across 35,000 plus invoices just this year. It's a huge metric and a huge time-saving effort that Kanverse is bringing to that team. Now, of course, let's finish up with our dashboards and reports. Really love our dashboards and reports here. Again, it's going to be that high-value overview of key performance and indicators to let your AP managers know how Kanverse is performing against the data we're taking. This dashboard ultimately provides framework for continuous improvement across different areas of AP. It's highly customizable and it's highly configurable to provide you different viewpoints on specific areas of your process. For example, here our first widget is going to have our documents and stages. Each of these widgets that you see here are going to be drill downable. So maybe I want to see all those invoices that have been published or what's in my inbox. I can easily click into that and see. When we talk about customization, configurable, we can also drill down specific business units or even vendors' names to see what's going on with those specific vendors. Now, in addition to all of these metrics, what we can see too is more or less the direction on how our team members are performing against their workload. We can see what's in process by an assignee, what's been published, and you can actually see a reconciliation of our integration with your email and our total amount of emails read, which of those have been invoices, what is other, and what's maybe an email with no documents. That might be an inquiry from your vendor. I love this dashboard too because it lets you know of areas where improvement is needed. So you can see your touched analysis of untouched or touched for PO backed invoices, what's been auto, what's been manual, difference between the two. Of course, your processing life cycle times. But this dashboard gives you that reconciliation of maybe where you can go to your CS head and say, hey, I'm noticing our extraction is failing a little bit on this document. Wasn't some additional training or an additional business rule that we can help reduce our life cycle time in? And of course, more or less your standard AP reports, what's pending approval, how many discounts do we have in process, our document volumes. You can even see volume by entity and that average processing time, and anything that's action pending with a collaborator, such as that GL account unknown assignage. Now, of course, with dashboards and reports, some of those key widgets, we do have advanced reporting in Kanverse. So what's really great about our advanced reporting, much like your typical AP or ERP, we can break it down by fields, who it's assigned to. Maybe you want to look at a certain, invoice aging report. We do have those pre-built in the system, publishing errors. So the best part about our reports is that you can save these reports and also schedule them too. For example, maybe I want to have a report of a vendor name that's Salesforce. What I can do is schedule this report to be ran on a daily, weekly, or monthly frequency. If I choose daily, it's going to do it each day of the week. Weekly, I can actually choose which days of the week I want it sent, or even monthly, which days of the month. We can add in as many email recipients here too to get those reports via email. Now we know this is a huge factor for most AP companies is getting those scheduled reports rather than having to come in and build them each time. What we can do is save these reports, and we can save them at various levels. We can save them at the system or the company level, across teams or certain individuals, or even your own reports. For example, I have a few pre-built reports here. Approval rejected invoices, any invoices with errors. Maybe I want to keep track of a certain PO and the documents being processed against it. Or maybe our largest vendor, Salesforce, and see how we're doing with those documents in process. Our dashboards ultimately provide any intake into your process and is helping streamline any type of needs from the AP team. And that's really all for today, everyone. If you enjoyed our 101 demo, please feel free to shoot me a ping on LinkedIn and connect with me, of course. Otherwise, if you do have any additional questions, rather than going to myself, please contact our head of business development, Cody Erickson. Here's some of his contact information here. It was a pleasure being with you all today, showing you the true power that Kanverse is bringing to enterprises worldwide, and we hope to see you all again soon. Bye-bye.